All right, we're going to go ahead and get this next one started. If everybody wants to find a seat, let's get it going. All right, our next speaker is relatively fresh on the scene, but has made a splash in the biggest of ways. With his work, he's helping to inform and educate people on the possibility that humanity is much, much older than mainstream academia would have us believe. He's helping with deep dives and palatable information to genuinely change the paradigm. You've seen him recently on Joe Rogan and talking to Graham Hancock. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Michael Button.
This one, yeah? I can use this one. Is it that one? This one. That one works. Okay, I'm using this one. Right. Hi, everybody. Hi, guys. How are you all doing? Good, good. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad to see you all here. And I'm very grateful and excited to be speaking at this amazing conference. It's so fantastic to see so many like-minded people all gathered in one place, and I want to give a huge shout out to Michael Collins, to Robert Dakota, to all the volunteers, to everybody who's worked so hard to bring us all together and organize this brilliant event. So yeah, thank you to all of them. Thank you to all of you for coming. There's so many great speakers here, and I hope you've had a great time so far. I hope you're looking forward to all the amazing people who've still got to come. Now, I've never done anything like this before. I've never done any public speaking, any kind of talking to an audience, so go easy on me. We've just had legend of the game, Dan Richards, so I'm probably going to bring the quality level down a little bit in terms of my speech, but you just have to go easy on me. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Button. I'm an ancient history university graduate who decided to not continue with the academic career that was kind of, my pathway, and instead go independent. And around about just over a year ago, I started a YouTube channel, and where I talk about all manner of historical mysteries. Sorry, I'm just turning my phone on silent because someone was calling me at a very bad time. But yeah, I talk about all manners of historical mysteries and all these things that fascinate me about the past and all these interests that I'm sure you all share. Today, however, I want to talk about one thing in particular, and that is the long, deep history of human intelligence, and why I feel the complexity of early humans has been somewhat underestimated and underappreciated by mainstream academia. So let me begin with a simple observation. See if this works. Yes. Humanity keeps surprising itself. Every generation thinks it has a firm grasp on who we are and where we came from. But every generation is proven wrong by its own discoveries. So, for example, we used to believe that the Earth was only 6,000 years old. We still believe that civilization is only 6,000 years old, although I feel some in this room may dispute that. And we used to believe that humans themselves, Homo sapiens, our species, were only 30,000 years old. But then we discovered that humans were maybe 50,000 years old. And then we discovered, no wait, maybe we're 100,000 years old. Then maybe 200,000 years old. Now many researchers comfortably say that 300,000 years is just the lower band. But this is just a marker of what we found so far, not actually what could have existed. Now, this pattern of constant revisionism isn't a flaw in science, it's the entire point of science. But it does highlight something uncomfortable, which is that we keep underestimating the depth of our own past. And that is where I want to start today. Because for most of the 20th century, the story of humanity, the story of our species, was ridiculously compact. You could teach it in a very neat linear progression. And I've got a very handy diagram here to show that progression. There we go. So it starts with upright apes, and then it moves on to fire and tools, and then gradually into language, art, agriculture, and then voila, modern humans. It's all very convenient. It's almost like a staircase, a smooth ascent, and everyone agreed because it felt orderly. But the last maybe 3 or 4 decades have completely torn that convenient staircase apart. What we're looking at now is not a neat progression, but a sprawling timeline of detours, missing chapters, and abrupt appearances of skills that we thought belonged to much later periods. And as we dig deeper, both literally and metaphorically, one theme becomes unavoidable. Humans and human intelligence appear much older, much more diverse, and much more complex than we ever expected. So now let's talk about one site that has quietly begun to reshape the entire field. So does anybody know what this is? It's a human skull, correct? Does anybody know which human skull?
Dragon Man.
It's not Dragon Man, Cody. That's coming later, I promise. Is it what, sorry? No, it's not Lucy, no. No, it's not that one. I'll put you out your misery. This is the Jebel Irhoud skull from Morocco. So in 2017, researchers announced that these fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, which were previously thought to be about 40,000 years old, were actually closer to 300,000 years old. And crucially, they were assigned to our species, anatomically modern Homo sapiens. Now, that wasn't just a timeline adjustment, that moved the entire origin of our species back by an extra 50%, because in 2017, we thought that we were 200,000 years old. But suddenly a whole 100,000 years had been added to our story just by this one discovery. Now, it truly was a remarkable find to discover that anatomically modern humans were quite this old. But it was also a problem. A problem for the story that we inherited, the very tidy origin story that was built on 2 assumptions. Assumptions that still subconsciously influence historical thought today. And these are the 2 assumptions. Assumption 1 is that humans emerged fairly recently. And assumption 2 is that complex behaviors emerged even more recently. But what if both those assumptions crumble when we scale out and take a longer view? To put it bluntly, the first one, the age of our species, is still a mystery. And it's a mystery that keeps getting older. But perhaps the greater mystery is why our abilities show up so long before the old models said they should appear. That disconnect, the disconnect between when we think humans emerged and when humans start acting like humans, is the foundation for everything that I'm going to be talking about today. Because we're now facing a picture where the archaeological record shows moments of startling achievement, bursts of symbolism, of art, of engineering, long-distance movements, all appearing in places and times where the traditional timeline says people should still be primitive. And whenever you see a pattern like that, a capability showing up long before its supposed evolutionary context, you have 2 choices. You can call it an anomaly, or you can accept that perhaps the model is wrong. Now, for decades, what conventional academia did was call them anomalies, and those anomalies were simply brushed aside. Not necessarily intentionally, not necessarily conspiratorially, almost understandably, because science needs structure, it needs models, it needs frameworks that help us interpret evidence. But the danger comes when the framework becomes so familiar that the evidence starts being shaped to fit it, rather than the other way around. And that's why I want to frame this whole talk around one thing, which is that the story of human origins is no longer a straight line. Instead, it's a horizon that we keep on expanding. And with that expansion comes a broader implication, one that academics rarely say out loud. If modern humans, or human-like intelligence, stretch back much further in time than our textbooks have traditionally suggested, then we must accept the possibility that large portions of our story are missing. Not because anybody hid them, but because time is brutal. And because our Earth is extremely good at erasing. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of years, potentially millions of years, of a mind like ours existing. What are the implications of that? We are an extraordinary old lineage living on a planet that is extraordinarily efficient at wiping its own surface clean. And that combination should humble us. So today, the first of these assumptions has been thoroughly disproven. Even the most conservative academic accepts that our species is at the very least 300,000 years old. But the second, the emergence of complex behavior, is still up for debate. However, I'm going to argue that human intelligence is much older than we thought, and thus that the implications of that are huge. So, I'm now going to talk about what has been the traditional academic idea on human intelligence, which is the cognitive revolution. For most of the 20th century and well into the 21st, the dominant story of human intelligence rested on a single but very powerful idea, the cognitive revolution. Now, if you've read popular books on human origins, such as *Sapiens*, the most best-selling book on prehistory literally ever written, then you will know this narrative very well. Around 50,000 years ago, give or take, something apparently changed in our minds. A spark apparently ignited, and suddenly we had symbolism, art, planning, cooperation, complex language, long-distance trade, and everything that makes us modern. This view has been widely accepted in mainstream anthropology, with prominent scholars like Professor Richard Klein writing in Stanford Magazine, 45,000 years ago, humanity was transformed from a relatively rare and insignificant large mammal to something like a geologic force. His influential book, The Dawn of Human Culture, which was published in 2002, promoted this view to a wide audience. But he wasn't alone. Other prominent academics, such as Professor Stephen Meathen, Professor Ian Tattersall, and Professors Thomas Wynne and Frederick L. Coolidge, have all also written prominent books supporting this idea. And it's understandable, right? It's a compelling story. It's elegant. It puts a clear dividing line between before and after, between archaic humans and us. Proponents of the cognitive revolution argument claim that it wasn't until this revolution that Homo sapiens became behaviorally modern. And they define modern intelligence as exhibiting key characteristics, such as symbolic thought and art, complex language, burying our dead, and planning. They argue that an explosion of undeniably remarkable cave art that was mostly found in Europe and dated to this time is evidence that this is when humans got smart. And for a long time, it did seem supported by the evidence. After all, the earliest widely accepted figurative art, elaborate burials, and ornaments did cluster around that 40 to 50,000 years ago mark. In Europe especially, there is a sudden explosion of beautiful cave paintings, carved figurines, shell beads, bone needles, long-distance raw materials transport, all the things archaeologists love as indicators of complex cognition at this time. So the field did what fields often do when confronted by an appealing and simple explanation. It's built an entire intellectual structure around it. In this structure, before 50,000 years ago, humans were cognitively limited. After 50,000 years ago, humans suddenly became symbol makers, planners, and thinkers. Modernity was tied to this specific moment in time, and other human species were assumed to be less capable by default. The cognitive revolution model became so embedded that for decades, any sign of symbolic behavior earlier than this date, this 50,000 years ago date, was labeled as an anomaly or dismissed outright. And it's not hard to see why. This model had narrative power. It made sense to the public. It provided a dramatic turning point, the kind of moment historians love to anchor a story around. It turned intelligence into a single, decisive event. But elegant stories have a habit of failing when new evidence accumulates. The problem with the cognitive revolution model isn't just that it was irrational, it's that it was built on a very, very limited sample size. It was shaped by the part of the world where early research was easiest, Europe. And Europe's archaeological record from the late Ice Age is spectacular. Beautiful cave systems, dry, stable conditions that preserve pigment, deep caverns that protect carvings. It's a dream for archaeologists. But the world is not Europe, and Europe is not where humans began. And once researchers began expanding their fieldwork to Asia, more into Africa, to Arabia, something became obvious, uncomfortable, and eventually inescapable. Symbolic intelligence didn't appear suddenly at 50,000 years ago. It appears scattered across the map and far earlier in time. The cognitive revolution didn't break down because of one discovery. It broke down because of dozens of them, each slowly chipping away at the idea of a sudden mental transformation. So let me give a few examples. Recent discoveries show that long before the so-called cognitive revolution, we can find stunning traces of symbolic thought etched into the archaeological record. At Blombos Cave, from 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens engraved intricate geometric patterns into ochre, strung deliberately pierced shell beads into necklaces, and crafted finely worked tools. This suggests not just utility, but artistry and identity. At Tinshemet and Kafska caves, also 100,000 years ago, humans carefully buried their dead with grave goods, hinting at beliefs about death, beliefs about memory or the afterlife, all concepts that are highly steeped in symbolism. At Classy's River and Eskul, dating as far back as 135,000 years ago, we see the use of pigments and personal ornamentation. Again, forms of self-expression, of status, of group identity. at pinnacle point from 165,000 years ago. Humans didn't just use ochre, they heat-treated stone to improve tool quality, indicating abstract reasoning, planning, and perhaps even ritualized behaviors. But even deeper in time, sites like Kapthurin from 285,000 years ago and Orgilasali in Kenya from 300,000 years ago show signs of pigment processing, experimentation with color, perhaps even tied to body art, to some kind of ritual or communication. Taken together, these discoveries show a mind capable of abstraction, of symbolism, of identity, and meaning far earlier than we're taught. These sites alone would be enough to challenge the cognitive revolution, but the list goes on. An abstract engraving in Java, which is attributed to Homo erectus, dating back more than 500,000 years. Structures across Europe, Asia, and Africa, dating back 500,000 years and older. But we'll come back to those later. This is not a pattern of sudden explosion. This is a pattern of deep, gradual, widespread intelligence and symbolic behavior appearing long before this supposed revolution only 50,000 years ago. And once you see that pattern, you can no longer treat symbolism as a switch that flipped at that date. It becomes something else entirely. A long, slowly accumulating tradition, a deep history of intelligence. But there's a second flaw in the cognitive revolution model that finally became undeniable. It wasn't just wrong about when intelligence emerged. It was wrong about who displayed this intelligence. Under the old model, sophisticated behavior should appear first among Homo sapiens and be absent in Neanderthals, Denisovans, and all the other earlier human species. It should be tied to our modern anatomy, to a genetic advantage that only we possess, to a neurological leap that is unique to Homo sapiens. But then, we found all this stuff. Neanderthal cave paintings appeared in Spain, and they were older than the arrival of Homo sapiens. Neanderthal shell jewelry, clear evidence of symbolic thoughts. Neanderthal eagle talon ornaments. Neanderthal stone circles deep underground. Neanderthal deep cave engravings that required fire, organization, and symbolic intention, and all predate our arrival entirely. Even Denisovans, a group we barely know about from fossils, left evidence suggesting long-distance raw material transport and sophisticated ornaments. And these discoveries are changing everything, because for most of the last century, the story of human evolution rested on a comforting hierarchy. At the top, or at the left, or the right from your perspective, stood Homo sapiens, clever, adaptable, artistic, and innovative. Below us stood the others. They were cast as side branches, evolutionary dead ends, prototypes that never quite got it right. We weren't just the last humans left, we were the best, the most intelligent, the ones who deserved to win. But suddenly the neat hierarchy collapses. The ladder of intelligence becomes a network. And the cognitive revolution begins to look less like a revolution and more like, I'm getting emotional, and more like a retrospective illusion. A side effect of where we were digging, not what actually happened. Now, this forces a larger and more foundational rethink. If symbolism, planning, and complex behavior show up repeatedly across different human species and show up far earlier than we expected, then we are not looking at a sudden cognitive revolution. We are looking at a deep heritage of intelligence, a heritage that likely stretches back to a common ancestor, potentially hundreds of thousands of years ago, possibly more. The assumption, the old model that shaped absolutely everything, was wrong. So what's happening now in paleoanthropology today is nothing less than one of the biggest reversals in modern science, a profound reevaluation of the intelligence of other human species. Not just their strength or their endurance, or even their adaptation, but their intelligence, their ability to invent, to plan, to symbolize, to navigate, to communicate in ways that stretch beyond survival and into culture. And once you take that seriously, the old ladder collapses completely. So let's start with the most familiar of our extinct cousins, the Neanderthals. So the popular image of a Neanderthal is of a brutish, grunting, dim-witted kind of idiot. But it's a myth. But it still pervades in the public consciousness. Like perhaps if you wanted to insult someone, you might call them a Neanderthal. But it's a myth. And that myth has a very clear origin story. In the late 1800s, right as Darwin dropped his On the Origin of Species and detonated the scientific world, literally the same year, the first Neanderthal skeleton surfaced. For Victorian society, it was a 1-2 punch. First, humans were no longer God's children. We were no longer the center of creation. Instead, we were just another animal, just another branch on a messy evolutionary tree. But then came the second blow. Not only were we just another animal, we weren't even the only type of human. The instinctive response to this was quite predictable. Protect the ego. If we couldn't claim divine uniqueness anymore, we could at least claim intellectual supremacy, right? So we started to draw a sharp line between them and us. We cast ourselves as the clever ones. Homo sapiens, the name we so humbly gave ourselves, literally means wise man. And we painted Neanderthals as the lumbering, knuckle-dragging dullards that we needed them to be. But this wasn't science. No, this was insecurity dressed up as anthropology. And it's why the myth of the stupid Neanderthals stuck for more than a century. But it's in fact embarrassing that it survived into the 2000s. Because today we know that Neanderthals were skilled engineers. They mastered birch tar adhesive production, a multiple-step chemical process requiring controlled temperatures and oxygen management. This is chemistry. We know they were capable of symbolic behavior, one of the key factors in behavioral modernity. As I mentioned, we see all the fantastic cave paintings that they produced. We know they were ornament makers. Again, as I mentioned, the talons of golden eagles that were fashioned into pendants at sites in Croatia, far older than sapiens' arrival in that region. We know they were deep cave explorers. In France, Neanderthals constructed stone ring structures more than 170,000 years ago, deep inside a pitch-black cavern, which they must have lit somehow. We know they were capable of long-term planning. Some tool types show standardized production sequences and curated toolkits that suggest multi-day planning horizons. We know that they used medicinal plants. We know they located, identified, and processed plants for medicinal purposes. And we know they built boats and sailed right across the Mediterranean, colonizing islands such as Crete. This is not almost human behavior, this is human behavior. The list goes on, but the more evidence we uncover, the more we're forced to admit that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens share far more cognitive ground than we've ever suspected, and that we weren't the only species capable of abstract thoughts or cultural traditions. And then we reach their eastern cousins, the Denisovans. If Neanderthals suffered from from being underestimated, the Denisovans suffered from barely being noticed at all. For years, we knew them only through fragments, a finger bone here, a jawbone there, a little trace of DNA. And yet, even from this limited evidence, a picture has started to form, and it is intriguing. They occupied extreme environments. Denisovan DNA appears in populations of the Tibetan Plateau, suggesting they had adaptive traits for high altitude long before modern humans ever settled there. They ranged across a vast territory, From Siberia to Southeast Asia, traces of Denisovan ancestry show a wide geographic spread, implying movement, dispersal, and likely good navigational skills. And they left advanced artifacts. At Denisova Cave, a polished green bracelet fragment appears remarkably sophisticated. Bead perforation, shaping and polishing that suggests a level of craftsmanship and symbolic thought that is never credited to archaic humans. This is artistic, and it breaks the assumptions that non-sapient groups were technologically stagnant. And if Denisovans were capable of such complexity while occupying extreme regions stretching thousands of miles, then we have every reason to suspect their cognitive abilities mirrored ours more than we once thought. And Denisovans, Neanderthals, and us, Homo sapiens, all share roughly the same brain size. Another reason to suggest that they had similar cognitive capabilities. But if Neanderthals and Denisovans force us to rethink the hierarchy of intelligence, the so-called minor species force us to rethink something even deeper, whether intelligence even needs a modern human brain at all. Take Homo naledi, a small-brained species in South Africa whose remains appear deep inside a cave system, accessible only through narrow winding shafts. Their deliberate placement of bodies suggests funerary behavior, from hominins with brains the size of a gorilla's. Or consider Homo floresiensis, the famous hobbits of Indonesia. Despite their small size and small brains, they produce stone tools comparable to those made by much larger humans. And perhaps most shockingly, consider Homo erectus, the ultimate long-lived human species, surviving for nearly 2 million years, colonizing huge parts of Africa, Asia, and island Southeast Asia. They survived in all different types of climates and adapted for it, suggesting intelligence. They were the first to master fire, suggesting intelligence. There is also strong evidence that erectus populations may have crossed water barriers. If that holds, it places intentional seafaring far earlier in prehistory than anyone once believed. And there is also strong evidence they built structures and homes 500,000 years ago and older. In every case, the implication is the same. Intelligence is not unique to Homo sapiens. It's a spectrum spread across multiple human species and possibly inherited from a shared ancestor far, far, far older than the neat timeline of 50,000 years ago. And once you free yourself from the assumption that modern intelligence appeared suddenly, once you see it emerging across species and across hundreds of thousands of years, a much bigger question emerges. If so many human species were intelligent, then what else were they doing? This is where the old models truly collapse. If Neanderthals could paint, sculpt, organize deep cave structures, and maintain symbolic traditions, if Denisovans crafted advanced jewelry and colonized extreme landscapes, if Homo erectus crossed water barriers and built structures, if Homo naledi may have practiced body deposition rituals, then the range of behaviors possible in deep prehistory expands dramatically. It forces us to stop thinking of the past as that monotonic staircase leading upwards towards us. Instead, we start seeing a long, overlapping tapestry of populations, each experimenting with culture, symbolism, and technology, problem solving, and environmental mastery. And this all brings us to the next step in the argument. If human-level cognition is this widespread, if the roots of symbolic behavior stretch this deep, if the archaeological record keeps revealing evidence far earlier than expected, then we need to entertain the possibility that human-like intelligence and human-like behavior might be dramatically older than our current timeline. So, every field has a moment when an unexpected discovery forces everyone to stop, breathe, and reconsider the foundations of their understanding. For humans' origins research, one of these moments arrived just a few months ago with a skull from China. Now, at first glance, it's just another fragment of cranium from the deep Pleistocene. These finds happen, they fill museum drawers around the world. But this one was different, because this one appeared to have features we associate with Homo longi, a very closely related lineage to Homo sapiens. and with an almost identical brain case. But this skull, shockingly, appeared to be over 1 million years old. Now, if you're on X, you may have seen me report on this discovery and be attacked by people like our old friend Flint Dibble, who called me a, quote, liar, grifter, pseudoscientist, and all the above for simply reposting this very BBC News article onto my page, which was a bit weird, but anyway. But the reason the response to this was so visceral, I think, is because it shouldn't really be possible under the traditional model. Not really unlikely, not controversial, kind of impossible. According to the traditional timeline, we're 300,000 years old. Our lineage wasn't supposed to have diverged any later than about 600,000 years ago. Anything older than that belongs to something else, like Erectus or the earlier African forms. But the Jungian skull does not neatly fit into those boxes. It sits right in the middle of our most tightly guarded boundary, the point in the timeline where we aren't supposed to exist yet. And that's why this discovery matters. Professor Chris Stringer, who was involved in this study and is a professor at the Natural History Museum in London, said, quote, "This startling analysis has dramatically shifted the timeline of the evolution of large-brained humans back by at least 500,000 years. He also said there are likely to be million-year-old fossils of Homo sapiens somewhere on the planet. We just haven't found them yet." Now, that's pretty incredible stuff, especially for a mainstream scientist to be saying. And to understand the shockwave, you have to appreciate the precision with which paleoanthropologists guard the boundary between early humans and our lineage. There are certain traits in the face, in the vault shape, in the curvature, in the bone thickness, which are used as signposts for when our line diverged from older forms. But the Jungian fossil exhibits a combination of a rounder, less robust cranial vault, of reduced brow ridges, of a more modern neurocranial shape, i.e. a modern brain size, and crucially, the proportions that appear transitional towards later Homo sapiens. Now, in isolation, any one of those could be explained away, but together, and dated to around 1 million years old, they pose a direct challenge to the accepted story. Because if a skull with modern features existed that early, then two possibilities emerge, and both are uncomfortable. Possibility one is that our lineage, the one leading to Homo sapiens, separated from earlier hominins much earlier than we think, not 300,000 years ago, not 600,000 years ago, but potentially 1 million years ago. And possibility two is that there wasn't a clean separation at all. Instead, multiple populations across Africa and Eurasia were exchanging genes, features, and behaviors for hundreds of thousands of years, blurring these neat boundaries that modern textbooks rely on. Either possibility breaks the current model, and that's why this skull is so important. So the traditional narrative that modern anatomy appears late, that modern minds appear later, and that modern behavior appears even later still, is completely destroyed by this one skull. If modern features appear 1 million years ago, then we have to accept that either modern anatomy is far older than modern behavior, or that modern behavior is far older than we've documented, or that both are part of a long continuum that began deep in the Middle Pleistocene and not in some neat late Pleistocene revolution. This isn't just a shift in dates, this is a shift in philosophy, a new way of thinking about what it means for a feature to be modern. And it forces us to confront a deeply awkward truth. The separation between archaic and modern humans may not exist at all, and modern intelligence could be 1 million years old. So let me outline the consequences of that bluntly. Firstly, it means maybe that sapient-like features didn't evolve late, they evolved early, which means that intelligence, planning and cooperation, and symbolic thought may also be older. The archaic species might not be archaic at all. They may simply be cousins in a long network of populations that all shared intelligent traits for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. And the 300,000-year-old age of our species may merely be an administrative label. It's true that the earliest fossil we have of Homo sapiens is 300,000 years old. But as Professor Chris Stringer says, There are likely to be million-year-old fossils of Homo sapiens somewhere. We just haven't found them yet. So think of all the lost chapters, the population expansions, the contractions, the bottlenecks, the cultures, the migrations, and the forgotten innovations that may have happened in that time. An almost unimaginably huge human history with a depth we've never explored. So here's the question. All right, the slides have stopped working. We're just going to have to imagine that the question's on the screen. Oh, shoot, now we're going way too far. Okay, there we go. If we're older than we thought, then what did we lose? Very smooth, very professional. I've also got a huge pile of papers on the floor here where I've just been casting them aside, but we'll carry on. So this is the real philosophical shock of the Yongshian skull. If our lineage stretches back over 1 million years, that's 1 million years of migrations, 1 million years of tools, 1 million years of knowledge passed down through generations, 1 million years of traditions, experiments, failures, successes, and forgotten breakthroughs, 1 million years of populations rising and then disappearing without a trace, 1 million years of cultures, lives, stories, families, adventures, whole societies that have been completely forgotten. And when you consider that the entirety of recorded human history, everything you've ever read about history, right back to the earliest dawn of human civilization, is only, apparently, 6,000 years ago. 1 million years starts to look like an awfully long time. And we may have lost so much because the Earth is brutal to the archaeological record. Coastlines shift, floodplains erase, ice sheets scrape continents clean, deserts entomb, volcanoes reset, forests decay, cosmic impacts wipe the slate clean, and only a tiny percentage of ancient material survives. A million-year-old lineage invites the possibility, not fantasy, not fringe, but basic logic, that we are missing vast chapters of our own past. Not necessarily advanced civilizations, but lineages, cultures, expansions, collapses, and innovations, and potentially civilizations that left almost nothing behind. A deeper human timeline is not an indulgence, it's a framework that fits the evidence far better than the rigid models of the last century, models that academia still clings to. And once you accept these possibilities, you immediately begin to acquire a new lens through which to view certain archaeological sites. And suddenly, places that used to look like outliers start to look more plausible. Some of the most controversial and quietly revolutionary discoveries in human origins research are not hidden in deep caves or locked in obscure journals. They're sitting in plain sight. And we've been interpreting them through a timeline that is now clearly too tight. So I'm now going to go through some of the best evidence to display human sophistication in deep time. And I want you to bear in mind that these are the few sites that have almost impossibly survived. And then I want you to think, if these made it, how many equivalent achievements didn't? There is some genuinely stunning evidence of sophistication deep in prehistory. Evidence that shouldn't exist if the old story was true. Remember, the mainstream once existed that we only became truly intelligent around 50,000 years ago, and only settled down and lived in permanent communities around 10,000 years ago with the Neolithic Revolution. But the evidence keeps disagreeing. Take Colombo Falls. Nearly 500,000 years ago, hominins there built a joined wooden structure. 2 massive logs deliberately shaped and notched so they interlocked. To do that, you need planning, you need foresight, and the ability to imagine a structure before it exists. It's construction, and it pushes organized engineering back hundreds of thousands of years. Because whoever it was understood joinery. They could plan ahead. They could manipulate material for structural ends. And it was part of a tradition of woodworking that clearly didn't begin with this one structure. Nothing appears in the archaeological record fully formed. You're looking at a tail end of a long line of knowledge. This discovery alone forces a major rethink. But in the context of potentially 1 million years of intelligence, Colombo stops being so astonishing and kind of becomes expected. If humans or human-like ancestors did have modern cognitive architecture that early, then 500,000 years of lost structural experimentation is not just plausible, it's pretty likely. And this site also suggests that humans may not have been nomadic. You don't build a complicated structure if you're going to leave the next day. It, along with all these sites I'm about to mention, suggests humans may have lived in settled communities literally hundreds of thousands of years earlier than the Neolithic Revolution, where conventional archaeology still insists that this began. But there's others. At Bilzingsleben, roughly 400,000 years old, archaeologists uncovered circular arrangements of stone and bone, post holes, evidence of a structure. Whatever it was, a dwelling, a workshop, a meeting space, it was a structure. It required spatial planning and shared understanding of how to build, and community-level organization. Then there's Terra Amata, also about 400,000 years old. Here we find traces of oval huts with structured floors, designated hearths, and organized activity zones. These weren't temporary windbreaks thrown together by nomadic wanderers. They were planned shelters built at a specific place, used repeatedly with space divided for different tasks. But almost twice as old as that, at Gersher Benot Yaakov in Israel, from 780,000 years ago, we see behavior that looks astonishingly modern. Hominins there didn't just survive, they organized their entire living space. Archaeologists found clear, repeated activity zones, one area for tool making, another for processing plants, another for cracking nuts, another for controlled fire. This isn't random scatter, it's a mapped out campsite, reused over and over again for thousands of years, with each space dedicated and specifically used for these specific tasks. But here's the key. There's no evidence of structures at Gersher Benot Yaakov, but it sits in a completely exposed environment. There is no natural shelter nearby. So how did they survive? How did they continuously live there all year round? Well, they must have built structures, and they've simply decayed. But even older than that is Olduvai Gorge, which is almost 2 million years old. And this shows patterned behavior. Again, stone tools knapped in one area, bones processed in another, and evidence of repeated return to the same spots. It's not just a campsite, it's a structured landscape of activity created by minds organizing their world. Archaeologist Mary Leakey said that she found a stone circle here, an almost astoundingly old example of humans potentially building. Now, this is controversial, but it could be evidence of humans engineering, of humans building some form of home almost 2 million years ago. All of this points to a mind far older and far more capable and far more complex than we were ever taught. A mind that could plan ahead, that could modify its environment and build a shared vision long before civilization began. And remember, these are just the few that impossibly survived the decay. And in my view, the presence of these structures so deep in time suggests there could have been many, 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 many more. Now we turn to the ocean and to the mystery that should have collapsed the cognitive revolution model long before it did. The presence of humans on islands they could not have reached without boats. There are 3 islands that were settled by humans that all required a crossing over deep ocean channels, over the famous Wallace Line. The key examples you can see here are Flores. Stone tools and hominins on Flores go back at least 800,000 years, possibly 1 million, but there were no land bridges. This requires a water crossing, over 100 kilometers across. In Luzon, in the Philippines, butchered animal bones and stone tools dating back 700,000 years show that some human ancestor also crossed deep channels. And at Sulawesi, a few months ago, archaeologists announced tools that date back over 1 million years, and this too required some form of water crossing. Now, for decades, the explanation for this was always the same. It was an accident. They drifted across on vegetation mats. And when we only knew about Flores, this kind of made sense. Maybe there was like some huge storm and some humans got thrown out to sea and somehow survived. But then we discovered the humans on Luzon, and it made a little bit less sense. And then we discovered the humans on Sulawesi, and it made even less sense still, because what are the chances of a group of humans, crucially, a group of humans large enough to become a breeding population, being swept out to sea, surviving for weeks or months under the blazing tropical sun with nothing to drink, and eventually being washed up on an island 100 kilometers away with a large enough number of people to populate the island and survive for hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, yes, okay, maybe once, flukes do happen, but twice or 3 times, all in the same area, at what point does coincidence start to look like behavior? So if this is true, this is not the behavior of a species whose cognitive abilities appear late. This is the behavior of a lineage that's had an intelligence deep in its ancestry. So if humans or proto-humans already had advanced cognitive features 1 million years ago, then the early water crossings are not really surprising at all. It's the logical expression of a mind that could shape wood, as at Colombo Falls, plan multi-day activities, as at Gersha Benot-Yakov, cooperate in groups, as at Terra Amata, and adapt to landscapes with creativity rather than instinct. This is a mind that experiments, this is a mind that explores, a mind that tries things and gets better over generations. In that context, crossing to Flores or Luzon is not a miracle, it's an inevitability. So, if we have strong evidence of humans building structures and homes 500,000 years ago and possibly much earlier, if we have humans building rafts and deliberately crossing ocean boundaries over 1 million years ago, if we have fossil evidence of a modern human brain size from 1 million years ago, if we consider all the other evidence that I've gone over today, I think it's clear that human intelligence didn't only emerge 50,000 years ago. I would argue that theory is dead, and that human intelligence is much, much older. So what does all this mean? When you look at these sites individually, they look like exceptions, anomalies, things to explain away. But when you look at them collectively, and through a deep time lens, a very different pattern emerges. This is not the pattern of a species that became intelligent suddenly recently, nor is it the pattern of a lineage that emerged only recently. It is the pattern of a very old mind, one with deep roots stretching back far beyond the standard model. The simplest explanation is no longer the old one. The simplest explanation is that the cognitive foundation of humanity is far older, far broader, and far more widely shared across hominin species than we imagined. So if our lineage is older, if intelligence is older, if symbolism is older, if engineering is older, if seafaring is older, then the final question isn't even about archaeology. It's philosophical. What does it mean for us, for our identity, for our place in evolution, our understanding of ourselves, if human intelligence is not a recent spark, but a deep, ancient inheritance? It means the old model is gone. It means intelligence is ancient. It means the human story is broad, braided, and deep. It means our family tree has more branches and more roots than we ever imagined. It means we've been underestimating our own antiquity for generations. And it means that the evidence we've already found becomes far more powerful when we stop trying to force it into a timeline it no longer fits. But above all, it means the mystery of who we are is far from solved. In fact, the story is just beginning. It opens the door to possibilities of entire human cultures, sophisticated ones, dare I say, civilizations, flourishing an incredibly long time ago. It makes the traditional idea of nothing happening all the way up until the Neolithic Revolution look bananas. If we've been intelligent for 1 million years, and it's still an if, but if we've been intelligent for 1 million years, if humanity is older than we believed, if our capacities stretch deeper into time than our species label suggests, then the question before us is not simply, where did we come from? It's this: what else have we forgotten? And what does a 1 million-year-old mind owe to its future? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, Rob, I've got my papers.
Thank you so much. Use this one. Thank you so much, Michael. We appreciate your presentation, and I've already heard some people saying this is his first presentation. So it was very good. It's very good. We had a great time. Thank you. If you have any questions for Michael, there's guys with microphones, so just please raise your hand and get a microphone first, because the people on the live stream can't hear your questions if you don't have a mic.
He just needs to turn it up. Do we have questions? All right.
Thank you. Hi. Over here. Kind of close. Over here. Hi. You said that the skull is from China. Was there anything else that was found in that dig site? Also, do we have a lot of access to China in regards to excavation? And also, just because I'm nerdy and I have to ask this because I have the microphone, I want to hear your thoughts on the Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching. Okay. It's the book written by Lao Tzu. Chinese
Sorry.
philosopher.
That's how say.
Yeah,
I know
Tao
what you
Te
mean.
Ching.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Okay, so yeah, sorry. That was my
That's
big
good. Thank you.
question.
Sorry, I've just got all these things and I'm very cluttered up here. So yeah, the Yunxian skull, there's like quite a lot there, and it's actually quite old. They discovered it in the 60s, but they didn't reclassify it until recently. So there's, I think, I'm not sure, like 3 skeletons maybe, and then there's these skulls that they've been crushed, so they couldn't quite tell what they are. But then they scanned it with CT imaging scanning just this year. Is it trustworthy because it's from China? I mean, it's kind of a fair question. The reason I trust it is because it was China in collaboration with Professor Chris Stringer from the Natural History Museum in London, and he's like a really respected scientist in human origins research. He's been around for a long, long time. Like, I respect his judgment, and he works with these Chinese scientists, so I respect the announcement regarding it. And I've forgotten the rest of your question. Sorry, what was the rest of it?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Thank you. My question was, since you found it in China, was there anything else found on that dig site at that time, or was it just the skull that was found that was dug up? And then also, what are your thoughts on the Tao Te Ching?
Well, I haven't read it, so I can't
What?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm a big disappointment.
Reading list to 2026.
I'll make a note of it.
Okay, please.
Yeah, I'll make a note of it. I can't give my thoughts on it. In terms of what was found at that site, I think it's just the fossils. As I said, they were found quite a long time ago, but it was just this reclassification that suddenly put it at that age. So, yeah. Thank you for your question.
One question over here.
Sorry, I can't see anything because of these lights. Hello.
Hey, what's up, right here? So, how familiar are you with Michael Cramo's work, Forbidden Archaeology?
I haven't read it. I know who he is and I know the book, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, because he talks about in there that the human civilization is about 1 billion years old,
Yeah.
which blew me away. So they're talking about hammers and things that were found in coal deposits that were so deep that there's no way it could have been developed or naturally formed earlier than 1 billion years ago. So things like that. So I just wanted to know, what are your thoughts on that? Is that even a possibility in your mind could be a realistic thing?
I mean, I would say everything is a possibility. Like, I try base what I talk about on my YouTube and like what I talk about here on stuff that there's like hard evidence for in like actual scientific journals and stuff. So I wouldn't say that there's any evidence that human like civilization or whatever existed, like, or that humans have existed for that long. I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible because, like, at the end of the day, we don't really know anything. Like, do you know what I mean? We don't know who we are, where we came from, or why we exist on this planet. So I wouldn't say it's impossible. I've seen lots of, like, the stuff from that book, like random little artifacts in, like, coal mines and stuff. Like, I sometimes post stuff like that on X and stuff like that and annoy people. So, yeah, I mean, I look at it with interest, but in terms of, like, human civilizations way back when, like millions and millions of years ago, I don't subscribe to that personally, but I wouldn't say it's impossible. That would be my answer. Thank you for your question.
All
Anybody
right,
else?
we got one over here.
Hey,
Hey.
You spoke on a personal note as that you decided to diverge from what would have been a mainstream academia career. Was there anything specific that actually led you off to the path that you're on right now?
Yeah, so I was at university from 2016 to 2021, I think. Might have got that wrong. So it's a few years ago now. And so I wasn't aware of any of the kind of alternative ideas regarding history when I went in. And it was during the course of my study that I started to... It was during the course of my study that skull that I showed, the Jebel Irhoud one, that was announced. And I saw that that was 300,000 years old. And that's when I started thinking about, you know, the massive discrepancy in the timeline between the story of civilization, 6,000 years old, and 300,000 years species, and how that's a crazy discrepancy. So that's when I started thinking about it. I did this module at university as well called Catastrophe, which was supposedly about how much a natural catastrophe has shaped human civilization during recorded history. And that kind of blew my mind as well. And then I started reading into the catastrophes that had happened in prehistory, and I was like, wow, this is so much worse. You know, think of all these crazy things that could have happened that could have both erased cultures and wiped the record clean they ever existed. In terms of the people that I went to university with, like obviously none of them agreed with this stuff. Like they were all very much by the book. But I mean, I don't blame them for that at all. I don't have any anger towards my professors or anything. I think the stuff they taught me was worth learning, and I enjoyed it. I just started to develop this difference of opinion with the kind of wider, high-level macro perspective on history during the course of my study. And that's when I started looking into this stuff, discovering people like Graham Hancock and all the people that are here today and stuff like that. So that's kind of how it happened for me. But it was a long journey, and then I always had this in the back of my mind ever since I left my degree. And then eventually I was like, you know what, I'm going to start talking about this stuff because I'm really fascinated by it and I really find it interesting. And that's why I started my YouTube channel, and now I'm here today. So yeah, thank you.
Over here.
Hello.
Assuming, and I really agree with you, that the current human is 1 million years old, but evolutionarily speaking, how many resets do you feel that we've been through during that 1 million years?
So do you mean like
Because we clearly were stunted for large portions of that, or we would have had a much higher evolutionary status prior to the 2 ice ages before.
Yes, you mean like kind of environmental disasters
Yes.
and stuff. Yeah. So I mean obviously I don't know because I'm just some random guy, but like I always look at as you say, the ice ages and the warm periods. So according obviously to the traditional view of history, the warm period that we currently live in, the Holocene, is what led to our civilization developing, right? So I look at all the other previous warm periods and think, you know, those 10 to 15 to 20,000 year periods which we lived through and which we potentially lived through as a modern human or an intelligent human, as I've been speaking about, what could we have done in that time? Because look at what we've done in the last 6,000 years, right? Why couldn't we have done anything in those warm periods? I do think that the ice ages and then also all the kind of natural disasters that could have happened, like comet impacts, super volcanoes, flood, like anything that could have happened to this earth could have been like extremely detrimental to humans. I definitely think there were long periods of times where humans definitely were what the conventional idea is, like hunter-gatherers. I think probably for the majority of our existence we were hunter-gatherers. But yeah, obviously my view is that potentially we weren't exclusively hunter-gatherers, and that there were periods during that whole, you know, massive history of our species that we might have done something more than walk around and live in caves.
Well, you hinted at it with the island hopping, that these people couldn't have randomly all got there and created enough, and pardon the word, but inventory of humans to excel and be able to create these villages or whatever. What do you think the inventory of humanity across that 1 million years has that clearly you're thinking about the numbers it takes to create these. What kind of global numbers are you thinking?
Yeah, so this is something I actually think about quite a lot, because there is genetic, they think they can tell how many humans existed at certain times through genetics. And according to what they currently have identified, there were never that many humans. Now, I'm not sure how much I trust that, but I mean, I'll take it at face value. So there probably was, according to this, probably never more than a few million humans at one time. But even a few million humans can have a highly sophisticated culture or a civilization. Like a few million humans can do quite a lot of things. So I would say even within that limitation that mainstream science provides, and I'm not a geneticist, so I can't really dispute that, I would say there's still a lot of possibility for prehistoric humans to have been doing pretty sophisticated stuff, to have established pretty sophisticated cultures. So yeah, I don't really see population size as too much of a limiting factor, because I think we could have got up to pretty big sizes and could have done a lot with that. So that's my opinion, but I don't know. Thank you for your question.
I got a question here, Michael.
Hey, Aaron.
Quick question for you. So we had William Henry talk last night about the increase in the prefrontal cortex at about 50,000 years ago, and he had his own ideas about what that was. Since you've spent a lot of time researching this and researching the development of humans over that, what do you, I'm going to ask you to speculate because I know it's not an established science, but what do you, in your opinion, what would you attribute that, the growth of the prefrontal cortex and the development, the rapid development of the brain size and cognitive capabilities to? I mean, William Henry's listed a bunch of stuff, you know, group sex to psychoactive mushrooms to alien intervention, so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
I mean, I would disagree. I don't think the human brain size did, or the prefrontal cortex did expand at that time. I mean, that would be what I would say. I think that we have strong fossil evidence that it was very similar 300,000 years ago to it is today. That's what I would say. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I could easily be wrong. That's just my opinion.
Hey Michael, have you listened to much or read much about the Doggerland Bank, the region around, sunken region around the Ireland of Britain?
The what, sorry?
Doggerland Bank.
Oh, Doggerland.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know too much about it, but yeah, I know it's that sunken area, like between like us and like Norway or something, like the North Sea.
Yeah.
It's relatively recent, isn't it? When that was land, I can't actually remember the dates, but it was
within the last 8,000 years.
Yeah. So it's like it's more recent than the Younger Dryas or whatever and stuff like that. I mean, I think there's definitely you could definitely find some crazy stuff there. They're already dragging up remains of settlements and stuff and humans living there. But I can't say I know very much about it. But I know it exists and would be a very exciting thing to learn more about. And there's so many places like that around the world, like the Sunda Shelf and down in Indonesia and all across the coastlines all around the world where the sea levels have risen since the end of the last ice age are probably prime locations for where humans would have settled and potentially built cultures. So it's very interesting. But I'm afraid I don't really know anything about Doggerland.
All right. Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, let's wrap up the questions there and give Michael another round of applause.
Thank you,
much.
everybody. Thank you.
Dude, I've been addicted to your channel.
Thank
you haven't been doing it that long, have you? When did you start?
I started in September 2024, so just over a year ago now. So pretty
Just
crazy.
over a year. How many subs do you have now?
Around 150,000. So
That is
It's
brilliant.
been a wild ride.
Yeah.
But I've been loving it and very grateful to everyone for subscribing to me because, I'm just chatting about stuff I love. So
No, you're hitting the zeitgeist right now, and you're asking good questions, and you're pissing off the right people.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
Flint, but that's
who
not
doesn't
people.
piss him off, to be fair?
I know. I just pissed him off a couple days ago. Good. But I've been a sub since you were on Rogan, and I pretty much watch your stuff every day. I just saw you put out a video. Well, you just shared a video.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen that one yet. But I love the rabbit hole you're going down now. And I stepped out, so I don't know if you mentioned it. Cave of Bones documentary. Did you ever see that on Netflix?
I didn't know.
Highly
Is that
recommend
the
it.
Homo naledi thing?
Homo naledi,
Yeah.
Long story short, for the people at home, it is a hominid that possibly ritualistically buried its dead, left symbols. The archaeologist who found it was freaking out. He was basically like, "Oh my God, I don't even know if I want to share this information." Definitely check it out. But it goes with your theory. I love that more people are talking about the nature of human consciousness, where that spark came from, and did we inherit it from other hominids, from Denisovans, which are crazy in itself. I love that you showed the bracelet. That's been my favorite.
Yeah, that's cool, isn't it? It's interesting.
Yeah. So what kind of brought you down that journey?
I don't actually know. I think it was because when I first started, I did all these videos, which was like yo, human civilization could be much older, like quite broad videos. And they're the first ones that popped up. And I had all these comments saying, human can't have civilizations older than that because we've only been intelligent for 50,000 years. And I was like, surely that's bullshit. Like, I'm pretty sure that's bullshit. So then I did a little this research into it, and I was like, oh, a lot of people still think this. And so I started hitting that drum like really hard because I was like, there's a lot of evidence that humans have been intelligent for way longer than 50,000 years. And so that's why I started hitting the drum about intelligence, and then I got into all other human species. I was like, shit, they might have been intelligent as well. And I found that really interesting, and that's kind of how I went into this kind of little realm. But I find it fascinating. I think it's something that's worth hitting because I think a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people don't realize that the Neanderthals weren't dumb. A lot of people don't realize how old intelligence might be. So, yeah, I think it's a drum worth beating, let's say.
Absolutely, and it's going to go deep, deep, deep into antiquity. Somebody brought up Michael Cremo. He goes a little far.
He goes a bit crazy.
He goes a little
He's
far.
a bit crazy for me.
I've read his book, but it's definitely worth thinking about. I do have one question from a viewer. So, Robate, what's up, brother? So he's going to get his money's worth. I've watched an extraordinary amount of pushback from and I had to ask him what this, the rump archaeo community, which I'm guessing is the the archaeologist community. Is there an instance during that pushback where you felt they had raised a valid argument? And if so, what was it? Congrats on a great presentation.
Thank you, Rubate. I think that was Rubate, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. I can't think of an I mean, a lot of the time they do. A lot of the time I see comments, and there are some people that are respectful in my comments, and they do, and I think, oh, fair enough. Yeah, I'll change my mind on that. I can't think of an exact example right now, but it does happen quite a lot on X. That's kind of why I use X. I use it as a little testing ground for like my ideas, and I like post something, and then sometimes they get really angry, and I'm like, you're wrong. And then sometimes I'm like, oh shit, yeah, maybe you've got a point there. So I quite like X for that reason, except for all the hate that's on there. But yeah, I mean, to answer the question, I think that they do, while there's a lot of anger amongst some people on Twitter, and some of it's unjustified, like as I mentioned in my talk when Flint Dibble attacked me for literally reposting a BBC News article, that was just weird, and I've had people abuse me and say really horrible things about me. Don't like that, obviously, but sometimes it can be useful to have people with differing opinions, kind of push back a bit so I don't go too far down a path that's wrong, and I find that useful. So,
yeah, it's absolutely useful. It keeps you honest, and there's a lot of good constructive criticism. Yeah. I even love the emails. I love you, but when they do that. But when it comes to that, you brought it up. This is job security for them. They should be curious about this, even if there's the slightest possibility, which there is, that this goes further back. Well, then just study it, and you will, and then people like Flint Dibble who want to be YouTubers really badly will be engaging enough for people to actually watch them. Yeah. Probably not, but anyway. I mean, anything's possible, right? I got to find out if this is a question. Oh, it's not. Okay, we're good.
Okay, awesome.
We're good. Dude, brilliant talking to you. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you also.
You're going to go places, kid.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I heard you shouted me out once, and I couldn't find it, but I appreciate it.
Oh,
people were commenting like, Gary shouted you out, and I was like looking for it. I couldn't find it, but thank you for that.
Almost every show I shout you out.
Oh, really?
I'm like, oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Because I watch about 3 of your videos a night, and I rewatch them. They're that good. So
I appreciate that.
I equate you to, you're like the drinker. So
yes, I've seen people say that. Yeah. And I was like, where's he said that?
You and Critical Drinker have a rare talent where you can put a lot of information in a shorter video, hit every point, no filler, and you're not leaving anything behind.
Yeah.
So well done on that.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, man. I'll see you on the panel.
Yeah, we still got that. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Gotcha.